Likutei Sichos, Chelik Yutes, Volume 19, the Sicha for Rosh Hashanah. This Sicha was delivered on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, towards the end of the day, in the year Tafshin Mem Aleph, which would be 1980. Now, that year, Rosh Hashanah was on Thursday and Friday, thus it led right into Shabbos. So this Fabrengen, when the Rebbe is delivering the Sicha, is Friday afternoon. Now, that year also was a Shnas Hakel, was a year in which they would have celebrated Hakel in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, which Hakel takes place on the second day of Sukkot. We're only going to cover the main parts of the Sicha. There's some parts that we'll just cover just in short. And just a quick introduction. We know that before a neshama, before a soul descends into this world, meaning before a baby is born, as the Alter Rebbe brings in the beginning of Tanya, it says, Mashbi'in oisoi tehi tzadik v'alti rasha, that they actually make the neshama take an oath that it will be a tzaddik, it will strive to be a tzaddik and not a rasha. And of course the explanations of Chassidus, that mashbi'in also means that they loaded up with all the potential, with all the resources necessary in order to be able to accomplish that. So that's one thing. Another thing to familiarize ourselves with is the rule that loy adu rosh, that adu, which is Aleph, Daled, Vav. Aleph is the first day of the week, Sunday. Daled is the fourth day of the week, Wednesday. And Vav is the sixth day, Friday. So it says that the first day of Rosh Hashanah could never fall out on either of these 3 days, for whatever reason. Now, another thing to familiarize ourselves, the famous line that's brought down in the Megillah, is a verse that says, V'hayomim ha'elu niskarim v'nasim, which literally translates as that these days are remembered, they're commemorated, and they are done. So the Arizal, and the Rebbe always would quote it, explains that what this really means is that whenever we remember an event, whenever we, quote, commemorate an event, it actually is reoccurring. Whatever happened then is actually happening again, and in fact, it's happening in greater measure. So let's go into the Sicha. The first few chapters, I'm just going to kind of skip through. In short, what the Rebbe was making the point that the Alter Rebbe says on the verse, Atem nitzavim hayoim kulchem, that you all stand today is the day of Rosh Hashanah, together, that Hashem gives us the strength to stand. That means it comes from Hashem, that He makes us be firm and steadfast, meaning victorious in the day of judgment. So the Alter Rebbe says that this is what comes from Hashem, but we have to do our part, meaning we have to contribute whatever we can, and therefore the Rebbe goes through several points where he explains how we contribute to it. A, by coming together in a place like that, in a Fabrengen, and then the Rebbe concludes, we're making the point that everybody has to partake in the simcha, in the joy. Why joy particularly? This is the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So the Rebbe brings the famous explanation in Chassidus that when it says Bakese liyom chagenu, Bakese liyom chagenu means that what is on Rosh Hashanah, Bakese, which also can be translated hiddenly, which is discreet, is liyom chagenu, is what comes out later in the day of our Chag. Chag is Sukkos. It comes out in a revealed manner. Thus, the Rebbe says, the simcha, the joy of Sukkot, and the idea of Hakel that will be celebrated that year on the second day of Sukkot, already we need to begin now on Rosh Hashanah to commemorate it and to bring it down into action. And thus, the Rebbe encouraged everyone to say El Chaim before sunset, because remember, it was going into Shabbos, and there are issues with saying L'chaim afterwards, because it's already Shabbos. It's not just Motzei Yontif. So that was the first part of the Sicha. Then the Rebbe explains that this which we discussed in the Maimer, the Rebbe would say a Maimer at these Fabrengens, recite a Hasidic discourse, and in the discourse he discussed Zeh Hayoim Tchilas Maasecha, something which we say in the prayers, in the Amidah of Rosh Hashanah. we say this is the day of the beginning of your creation. And in the Maimer was discussed the difference between Zeh and Koi, this and so. And this was based on teachings on Maimarim of the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. So the Rebbe explains, this is the Rebbe goes into the special connection of the Tzemach Tzedek and Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because we know that the Tzemach Tzedek was born on Erev Rosh Hashanah, on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, the very last day of the year. And his bris took place in Aseres Yemei Tshuva, which is between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So he has a special connection to this celebration that we're celebrating now, says the Rebbe. And that's why he was mentioned in the Maimer. Now, we know, says the Rebbe, it is related that when the Tzemach Tzedek was born, that's when the Alter Rebbe, that year, on that Erev Rosh Hashanah, is when the Alter Rebbe delivered the Maimer, the discourse, which begins with the words Mashbi'in Oisai Tehi Tzadik, that they make him swear that you should be a Tzadik. And this Maimer later became the first 3 chapters of the Holy Book of the Tanya. So says the Rebbe, the fact that the Tzemach Tzedek was born on this day, and the fact that this idea, this concept of Mashbi'in Oisai was discussed on that Erev Rosh Hashanah, is something that is specially connected to Rosh Hashanah. And this is something that reoccurs every single year. It's not just that we commemorate something that happened in the past, but it reoccurs every single year. And the Rebbe explains how. You see, on Rosh Hashanah was the creation / birth of Adam Harishon. Who really, this is not just something that happened back then, but this connects to each and every one of us, each and every single human, and especially Jews, individually. Why? Because the Mishnah tells us that Lefichach nivra Adam Yechidi. Why is it that man was created singular? Why did Hashem make it so that when it came to every other aspect of creation, they were created in multitudes? Hashem didn't create just one blade of grass, just one tree, and then from them came all the rest. But rather, Hashem created, as it says, Olam Mamolei, a complete world. It was full. There were parks, there were forests, there were wilderness, there were trees, there were gardens, there was everything. And only when it came to man, he created him one. So the Mishnah says, because this is to tell us, to emphasize, and to who? To each and every one of us, that every individual is like a olam mole, is like a full world, is like a complete world. So that means it tells us that the birth of every single individual is on Rosh Hashanah. Essentially, the birth of every human being reoccurs on Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, says the Rebbe, it's so apropos that the delivery of this Maimer of Mashbi'in Oisai is an Erev Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because if the birth is on Rosh Hashanah, then it follows that the oath is taken before, prior to that. When is that? Erev Rosh Hashanah, and it fits exactly into place. So in other words, this is reoccurring that every single person is being told on Erev Rosh Hashanah, Mashbi'in Oisai Tehi Tzadik V'al Tehi Rasha. Says the Rebbe, this year there is actually a special connection to this idea of, quote, Niskarim V'Nasim, that we commemorate and it happens once again. How so? So the Rebbe says, we know the rule, Loi Adu Rosh, that Rosh Hashanah cannot fall out. The first day of Rosh Hashanah can never fall out on Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday. Now, therefore it comes out that never ever, or so it seems, never ever could we relive, so to speak, or reenact the exact birth of Adam Rishon, because we're saying that the first day of Rosh Hashanah could never fall out on Friday, right? And we know that Adam Rishon, man, was created on Friday. Says the Rebbe, however, because we know that there are 2 days Rosh Hashanah, and these 2 days, as Chazal explain, is really like Yoima Arichto. It's like one long day. In other words, the 2 days of 24 hours each is not like 2 separate components, but it's like one component of 48 hours, one long day. It says the Rebbe comes out that indeed, in a situation like this year, the year when the Sicha was delivered, that Rosh Hashanah was Thursday and Friday, then it's actually very exact and fitting to what occurred the first time. Because what happened the first time? When was Adam created? Adam was created towards the end of the 6th day. Not in the beginning, not the night before, not in the morning, but later on in the day. Thus, it comes out that now that we have 2 days, which are like 2 long days, so in fact, when is the quote creation, the rebirth of man taking place? In fact, it's taking place towards the end of the day, which in this case will be towards the end of the 48 hours. And it comes out that everything is precise and exact. It says the Rebbe, now that we've mentioned the idea of 2 days, Rosh Hashanah, it's just worthwhile to point out, says the Rabbi, he digresses for a moment, that this actually brings out another aspect of achdus, of unity amongst Yidden, where you see it specifically in Rosh Hashanah. How so? When it comes to all the other celebrations, all the other chagim, or Yomim Tovim, there's a big difference. There's a distinction between Eretz Yisrael and the diaspora, right? In Eretz Yisrael, it's only 1 day, the celebration, and in the diaspora, it's 2 days. Whereas Rosh Hashanah is actually a 2-day celebration, whether it's in the diaspora, Chutz La'aretz, or whether it's in the Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe brings a source for this, which is actually a biblical source. In the book of Nehemiah, in chapter 8, over there he describes how after the return to Yerushalayim, to Eretz Yisrael, the resettlement, and how they built the Beis HaMikdash, and how the first time they all came together to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. And it says over there that they went, the entire people went, all the people went home to eat and to give out gifts and to lasoi simcha gdolo, to make great joy, to generate great joy. And afterwards, there's a discussion as to what took place on the quote, ubayoim hasheni, and on the second day. It says the Rebbe, what's that second day? Doesn't say the next day. It says, after describing what happened on the day of Rosh Hashanah, it says on the second day. Well, this tells us that there was indeed a second day of Rosh Hashanah already in biblical times, as quoted in Torah Shebiksav. Now, the Rebbe says, parenthetically, the fact that we brought this idea, we just quoted this pasuk, regarding the Simcha Gdola, the great joy, says the Rebbe, this reminds us of what the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, brings in a Maimer. In Sefer Maimarim Tavshin Gimel, that we see that when you coronate a king, there is great joy, there is tremendous celebration. And therefore, since Malchusa de Ara Ke'em Malchusa de Rekia, that the kingship down here is a reflection of the kingship above, meaning the true kingship, the Hashem's sovereignty, therefore, there is great joy on Rosh Hashanah. That's how the previous Rebbe explains it. Says the Rebbe, just we take a moment to digress and to clarify something, that we need to be clear with when it comes to this type of expression. Remember, the Rebbe says that just like down here there's great joy, so too on Rosh Hashanah when we coronate Hashem, there's great joy. Says the Rebbe, we have to be clear and make sure to look at this in the correct manner, approach it from the correct perspective. It's not that there is a fact that down here this such and such occurs, and therefore it also occurs above in a likewise manner, but rather the other way around. The truth is that what sets the tone, what establishes fact, is what happens above, what happens in the higher realms. However, since it's impossible for us to grasp, to comprehend what goes on above, Hashem makes it so that there should be a reflection down here, something similar of the same, of a similar kind, that it should give us an idea somewhat of what goes on in the abstract, what goes on in the heavens. So in other words, what happens down here comes after the fact. After the fact that it's already been established in the spiritual realm, now what happens down here is to just give like a reflection and to help us get somewhat of a glimpse of what goes on up there. But going back to what we discussed in Nehemiah, where the Rebbe brought the source that there was a second day Rosh Hashanah. This is, remember, to just quickly summarizing, to establish how the birth of man actually that takes place in the second day of in that year, that the second day of Rosh Hashanah was a Friday, was very apropos because that's towards the end of the quote, long day, and it's similar to what occurred the first time, right? So now the Rebbe says, let's focus in on what actually took place on that second day. In other words, what does the verse tell us about what happened on that second day of Rosh Hashanah? So in fact, it says that they all gathered together, and there the people were told about the celebration of Sukkos, how and with what to make their Sukkos. And in fact, it says that they went and they did as they were told. They accomplished it. Now, the Rebbe makes a point to stress, to emphasize that it's not that they actually did it because they were not allowed to build their Sukkos and to go gather all the material for the Sukkos on Rosh Hashanah, it's Yontif. However, the fact that they made a decision to do so, as we find elsewhere in the Torah, already makes it considered for them as if they have already implemented it, as if they already accomplished it. And then what does it say? Afterwards, it does tell us how they went about with the celebration of Sukkos, that they went out and they collected all the material and they built Sukkos, each person on his rooftop or in the courtyards. And then it says they even built in the courtyards of the Beis Elokim, of the house of God, meaning of the Beis HaMikdash. So the Rebbe brings from the response of the Goinim that they were asked if you need to build a sukkah, if there's an obligation to build a sukkah in a shul, around the shul, or adjacent to the shul. Now, there's a whole lengthy answer, as typically responses would go. And in the beginning, they seem to side with the notion that no, there's no obligation to build a sukkah in or around a shul. Why? Because the Torah says, "Vasukas teishvu shivas yamim." You should dwell in the sukkah 7 days. A shul is not a dwelling place, and therefore there should be no obligation. However, later they switch around and they conclude that indeed you do need to build a shul. There is an obligation to build a sukkah around the shul. Why? First of all, many shuls would typically in those days have like a few guest rooms for dignitaries, for rabbis who were coming by to either teach the people or just to be guests. So there's already a, quote, dwelling aspect to the shul too. And then they bring this verse as proof, as solid proof, that over here it says that they built sukkahs in the courtyard of the house of God. So you see the house of God also calls for the building of a sukkah. In any case, back to the point, says the Rebbe, from everything that was discussed, from the entire Sicha, and all the proof that was brought, from the fact that Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot have a very strong connection. Moreover, as you see in the book of Nehemiah, that the celebration of Sukkot was already discussed on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, says the Rebbe, therefore it's appropriate now that we still are in the second day of Rosh Hashanah to address the celebration of Sukkot. Not only just as plain celebration, but also as it says there that they generated a simcha gedola, a great joy, to bring it so, to make it so that it should be a tremendous joy. What is this, says the Rebbe, practically speaking, what do I have in mind? So the Rebbe says, as discussed already in the past many times, in relation to the celebration of Rosh Hashanah, that even though it doesn't say it explicitly in halacha, but still the Rebbe emphasized and always made a point to bring this out, to be sure, to see to it and make sure that those who are in need also have the means to celebrate Rosh Hashanah in a joyous manner. Says the Rebbe, how much more so does this apply now that we're on Rosh Hashanah thinking about Sukkot, considering how we're going to make the Sukkah celebration? Because Rosh Hashanah, it's only hidden. The celebration of Sukkot is only hidden, and already there's a Simcha G'dola. How much more so when it comes to Sukkot itself, which is the festival of Simcha, that we have to see to it, making now the decision in our minds, which already consider it as if we've already done it now. Similar to what it says in Sefer Nehemiah, that those who are in need, we're going to not only fill the needs, but in such a manner that's going to bring them tremendous joy throughout the entire celebration of Sukkot. And this, says the Rebbe, will certainly lead that we also will be in a certain joy, in an absolute joy, the ultimate joy, as it says, the time of Mashiach, it says it will be Simchas Olam Al Rosham. The joy of the world, meaning the ultimate, the greatest joy ever, will be on their heads. B'karav v'yameinu mamish.